Oops, there we are.
Hello.
Okay.
Just did it. All of my programming files over the stuff.
Oh, good, okay.
That I had put stuff at my house, you know, because I was working from home. And I said,
Yeah.
I could use that.
It's warm in here.
But I didn't,
We're wasting
but I didn't
heat.
need my, I wouldn't give her my.
What's that?
It's warm in here. We're wasting heat.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
It's warm in here.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
wasting heat.
No, it's either warm or freezing. You can take your pick.
And typically your upper floors are warmer.
Oh.
This is our basic HVAC system. We actually don't have it. But it's a problem, we shut a couple of these off,
And so is,
but even if one of them's on, sometimes it's too hot.
I need it.
There's a reason I stayed in the Northeast and did not go to Florida with my parents. I could not handle that heat. I was down there for 2 years. Part of the reason I worked in nights in a psych hospital was it had great air conditioning and I wasn't out in the daytime to be exposed.
Yeah, I'm with you on Florida. I only go down there to see friends and family. I don't go down there to the weather.
I've had such a twisted day, I couldn't give you an answer.
Oh, that's okay. I wasn't sure you even remembered.
Yeah, it's,
But on the form that you filled out, you had the two indicated, the administration and the building. And you,
Oh,
I
yeah.
what you said was that you only want to do one of those. So
I'm kind of wondering, I don't know what's customary, but I'm also wondering how much I should do just to get my feet on the ground first.
no, I don't blame you.
Particularly with,
No, I'm not trying to.
yeah,
twist your arm.
yeah, particularly with trying to get this rewrite done and my phone lines to the house quit this morning, which makes for one hell of a week because I get far more done on days I work remotely than when I go into the office.
Did they give you an idea when they can come in? Or is it just you or does it need?
Sometime between 1 and 5 tomorrow.
Okay.
So I'm trotting into the office another morning and doing meetings by phone tomorrow afternoon, waiting for them to show up. Well, some of my main, like the guys across the street, they both work from home. They run through Time Warner and cell phone. So they don't have a Verizon bill on the house. I've got Verizon DSL.
Okay. Verizon as soon as we could. We got so tired for their whatever the fall, it kept breaking, it kept not working and they patched it.
Are you doing anything special for the Victorian stroll?
So
Are you doing anything special for the Victorian stroll this year?
No, they're not doing the entertainment like they usually do, which is what we normally
Right, yeah.
participate
And that
in.
and the mayor.
And then I just heard it's supposed to be all month.
Yeah.
So there's, but mostly geared towards, shopping and that sort of thing. So I don't quite know,
Yeah.
what to do with it. Well, hopefully next year they'll go back to the original.
Right, people are still not
It's still hard to live.
I'm asking if that's
It's not what we do. So then. I find Rachel was the most disappointing toy I ever got. It's like, oh, look, she can do it.
Oh. I do
Or
remember-
maybe,
No, but I can like go to a restaurant and see the person across the table and read my menu.
oh, that's
where I find it.
I still have to take. Couldn't see that. So no, they just.
And it could be, I think,
Once you start, you can't go back.
I do go, I sometimes wear just the regular, or just the,
these are progressives, the only progressives that about.
yeah. I tried the progressives and I didn't do a good job with them. So.
You had to change my.
The one thing I do find when I'm at the ammo for planning the word at mass, so I don't have to switch gradients and progressives, I have the scripture all the way up on top, so I can keep them in the same plane. You never have to look down. McCarthy Tower in Albany was an example, one little mistake and it becomes a big problem.
Yeah,
I don't know if you saw that.
here's one.
McCarthy Tower in Albany yesterday. One little mistake with your building and it becomes a big problem.
Yeah,
Gentleman was driving the truck into the building, the one they used to get the big earth mover tires. His boom was up a bit. It was boom, all right. He got the facade he got part of the roof, it got inside, they still had the street in front of the building shut off today. Once you hit something hard on an old building, it goes everywhere. I'm sorry, I'm late.
I don't think by much.
Did anyone have
Or
any
two.
sections with the draft notes agenda sent out?
In what way?
If you want to add to the agenda, if you want to take off the agenda, and
yeah, that one.
Well, I'm thinking that since what we've seen from the presentation, we've got some other choices possibly and some other imperatives.
so that'd be great if we can certainly can add those on to the list here. That's the idea of, I think we had some blanks at the bottom previously. We can certainly add those on. So that's definitely part of the goal. Yeah. Did anyone have any concerns with the minutes of the last meeting? Then it's
We are recording,
What's that?
we're recording, and we're going out to the world.
Yes.
It's
Okay.
been, yeah, it's been recording all
Okay.
along.
we're live.
Yeah, soon as I hit start, it records.
Okay.
Shall we go through the agenda as it's laid out in order?
Sure.
Okay, then why don't we do a review of the current projects that are currently under construction, where it is, I think the last time we left off, we talked about the north and east wall repairs, construction is complete, we're just waiting for final cost report and where we came out.
I think this will help. Let's see. if there's anything there. Yeah.
We got one more, sir?
That's okay. I'll look at it.
The work itself on the north wall and the east wall is complete. And we have a tally of final expenses here. The notable thing, a couple of notables on the north wall. we're about 6,500 above what we originally had planned. Based primarily on a change order for additional work on the foundation stones. They were in rough shape, a lot of spalling and a lot of additional pointing up than always needed. But actually, the project came out pretty close. I mean, for that kind of work, you know, pretty close to what we planned. I have filed the final report to the state. And there's a little more paperwork after that. Apparently, I had to find just another file, a 10F report, which is just a budget analysis. But so basically, we're waiting for the additional 10% on that, because initially on these grants, you get 90% of it up front. So we're waiting for about 20,000 on that.
And the 6,500, looks like we can cover that out of other.
That
funds.
basically just comes out of our construction account, which is
Great.
unrestricted. And then the SAM grant on the east wall, again, that work is completed. We did go over that estimate a bit for a couple of reasons. We did credit the additional roof work, the repair of the EPDM roof on the east wall grant. Basically to keep the public library construction grant really close, you know, to the original amounts. So the couple of things, the couple of change orders, the roof repair, which was definitely needed, and they did a really good job on repairing that APDM roof. And replacing some bricks. Actually, we didn't estimate that originally, but replacing some bricks and repairing the chimney. The chimney wasn't actually included in the estimate at all. So we had to do a change order on that. So that came out to 152,800 total. We have received 93,000 already from DASNY, and we have made a final request for the additional funds. The total for that grant would be 125,000. So we will be seeing an additional about 30,000.
And I apologize, I haven't quite followed all of the math on this here. So the original cost of the project was 132, or that is the final cost of the project?
Which one now? What?
The east wall.
Oh, the east wall, the final cost is 152,800.
Okay.
Yeah.
Final total.
Originally, we talked about 132,000, which was the original estimate.
And the original estimate was for 132.
Yep,
The SAM grant is what awarded was 125.
125.
Final cost is 152,800. And so the library's portion goes from 7,000 up to, do the math and figure out.
Oh, yeah, so the library portion,
27,800. Okay, good. Thank you
Okay.
for clarifying that. I apologize.
that should have been in there, but anyway.
So that will come out of the construction account as well.
Yeah, basically it comes out of the construction account. The unrestricted.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions about this report? Okay, thank you very much for pulling this together. I appreciate it. That's understandable. Very, 17. Oh, excellent. Lansing cupola project.
Not a great deal of change other than my 8 or 9 phone calls, but final contract is signed and they're saying that, of course, they're gonna get this done before the weather gets really bad. I thought the weather was pretty bad as it is, but they're, I guess, used to working in these kind of conditions. But as long as they can get the copper roof, we'll get this done before, well, before the end of the year.
Start and finish before end of year. 2021.
What's that?
Start and finish before end of 2021.
Yes.
I find some contractors have to be really clear when you say, when finished by the end of the year, you have to say which year.
Yeah, this year.
Yeah, the guy who used to repair fire trucks, his answer was 2 weeks. You had to pin him down, which 2 weeks?
I know, yeah, it's always, yeah, it's always 2
Which
weeks.
2 weeks in which month?
Yes. Okay, then the reconstruction grant for the basement floor slab and the second floor plaster. I think TAP has started their construction, their bid documents for that.
Yeah, they're gonna be working on that. I sent over the descriptions and stuff. The hold up on this one is the hold up of the funds.
Right.
I mean, we didn't get
Just
the
got
money,
those.
and these grants, I don't like to start them until we got the money.
May I ask questions here about the plaster? What are we planning on doing?
Is what,
With the plaster work, what is getting done?
that's to be repaired. You know, the leaks are to be, we feel that it's because with these, it's where the 4 big roof drains are. And what happens is, with the change in temperatures, you get condensation, which leaks down through. So we need to repair, after we insulate the drains, we need to repair the plaster areas.
And if I remember correctly, I think most of it's in the main reading room.
Right.
If you look in the upper 4 corners, you'll see there's some funky plaster damage. And gonna go in and open it up, re-insulate the roof leaders, and then repair the plaster to match the existing and repaint it. And I think that when they open it up, we should be prepared that, you know, they may say, you know what, this isn't just condensation. Maybe there's rusted pipe there that has holes in it that.
That's where I'm going, because a part of what was discussed at the last presentation was doing work on mechanical systems. And part of it was doing things like replacing all those drains.
Yeah.
And I'm worried, are we gonna be doing plaster twice? That's my question. Are we, you know, if we replace drains, we not bring the wiring up to safety. And if we run sprinklers, are we gonna end up replastering fresh plaster?
Yeah, that there's certainly potential for that now. Hopefully, if we can address some of these things now, it'll keep us going. But if we don't, you know, we don't know what the next project will be and when that will start. So I don't think we can just wait until, you know, we may end up taking a few things apart again. Maybe, but if we, until we know what the next project is, what the timeline for the next project is, I think we have to move ahead with the birds that we have in the hand as opposed to waiting for the bush coming 10 years down the road, or 5 years down the road.
Yeah, that problem has been with us for many, many years. We've done a lot of different approaches, nothing so far has worked. Hopefully, insulating those drains will stop the leak. But it's, yeah, that project is gonna be tricky, cost-wise too.
I've also heard concern that, about keeping up the roof drains, making sure they're clear in terms of maintenance.
Yeah, we've,
Do we do that on a
that's
regular basis?
included, we've already done that with those drains. In other words, we had a company come in and do the camera thing to make sure that they were clear. So we don't believe, there could be actual physical leaks in those too. We don't know at this point. But it's been same story. We had that whole room painted, not 10 years ago or so. And of course, the leaks came back.
And the other thing I'll say in terms of maintaining the roof drains, it's always a challenge to get up there. If you ask a roofing company, they'll say, oh, you should be up here checking every 3 months or every 6 months. It's very difficult to do that. I don't know if any facilities actually do that. And on this building in particular, to get up to the roof is very challenging. Maybe if we can do some of the restorations that have been talked about in the addition, the stair tower addition, that could be a proper stair tower that goes up to the roof, and it gets easier and safer to get up there. Right now, you have to sort of go up a ladder and climb through a hatch, and it's pretty awkward to get up there.
I
So,
do know of places that do it on a regular basis, but they, at the time they constructed the building, they provided something that will, more like a ship's ladder. It's just a very steep stairway with handrails, fully OSHA compliant, with a full-size door to get out there.
right.
And they get out there every 2 or 3 months, but they plan on doing that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, at that time, I was thinking about that here.
So it is a challenge. I think Paul and staff have been trying to do it, but I would say that, could there be more? Sure. But I think it's challenging with the staff that's available and we're having someone else being hired to come in to do it. It's an expense that goes with it. So it's a trade-off, and certainly I think if we can address the plaster, take a look at that, and then assess the drains to see if they're in reasonable condition, that will help tremendously. And then, yes, upkeep and maintenance will be required. I agree 100%.
Sometimes, the drains, even when the drains are clogged, the problem has more been leaks from the EPDM section.
But that's, yeah.
There was a lot of repair work that was done up there.
Apparently from reading the presentation, more is needed.
Yeah.
Replacement is needed.
Agreed. Yeah, at the end of life is mentioned. So Paul, did TAC give you any timeline, or can we push them to get a timeline, or what they think the timeline is to get documents together to go out to bid?
No, we don't have it. I don't have a timeline yet on that.
I think getting a timeline would be
Yeah,
valuable if they can help us out with that, and just get a better understanding of what to expect.
Right.
Any updates on the cornice reconstruction? We got our partial award notification, 160,000 plus.
Yeah, the
dollars.
only, that's not changed. We were approved by Upper Hudson and sent to the state for review.
Right.
But nothing else after that.
And am I right, that's DASNY that will be giving us that second thumbs up?
Well,
Is it
these
shipped?
things,
SED.
DOD approves it, but they first send it to DASNY for review.
Okay,
And a lot of time, I mean, what Disney's doing is making sure that DLD is following, you know, the guidelines for these grants. And like I said, they're looking for, you know, stuff that's strictly maintenance, and they're going to throw that out.
Right.
That's why we keep changing the wording to restoration. But yeah, I mean, generally, they have been, they send all of these to DASNY for, you know, their approval. Usually, any questions I get are from DASNY.
No word yet.
Yeah, last time, I mean, on one of these, we had to have the estimate redone, but
It sounds like they got a pretty good estimate for the corner store there, took a pretty close look at it.
yeah, this should not be a problem. Now, there was on this one, it's the first time I think it happened, there was a lot of questions from SHPO.
Yeah,
So they want progress reports
sure,
and pictures
yeah,
on the work.
yeah,
And, you know, there, again, with historic buildings, the main thing is the outside and what it looks like, you know. That's what they're really looking for. So I had to agree, you know, we'll send them this stuff and keep them posted along the way.
no news yet. I'm sorry, you said DASNY is doing the review for DOD?
Yeah, in other words, well,
Who is DOD?
DLD is Division for Library Development. It's a division of
Okay,
State
okay,
Education
Department of
Department.
Defense, I was gonna say.
So it's really State Education Department, Division for Library Development.
Thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it. So are there any other questions about ongoing construction projects or grants that are in the award process?
This all of them?
Those are, yeah, I believe so.
Then there can't be any more questions.
The next item I have on here has to do with prevailing wages. And a lot of the projects I work on for public schools, for SED, there's a requirement for prevailing wages. And it's not clear to me at this point whether the work that we're doing also is required to meet prevailing wages. Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
So are we getting?
Actually, everything we do is supposed to be prevailing wages.
So are we getting
Every
wage
contract.
reports from all the contractors as they do their invoicing?
Yep.
Okay, so then I'm going to strike this request for the contract review and just say that prevailing wages are required for all work that we do.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that goes right in the contract. That they all know. Anyway, goes into any estimates. We always specify that.
And we have been getting wage reports from
Yeah,
contractors.
we get wage reports from every project.
In the back of my mind, when I heard that the cupola project was getting a reduced scope and the dollars went down significantly from what they originally had estimated, I was thinking, okay, are they still going to be doing prevailing wage? But that sounds like that's baked in there.
Yeah, part of it is prevailing wage, of course. Part of it is we had originally specified an awful lot of material changes that we now are gonna not as many and do more patching and that sort of thing.
Okay. And the wage reports are
And then,
filed in you keep them on file somewhere.
yeah.
Okay.
But the original estimate was was lower, but when they went to bid on this, they included cost for cherry pickers, for lifts. And so then they went back and said, no, we can do this with ladders.
Okay,
So
working off the buildings, and ladders and stuff.
right now it's at 28,000, and that's what, the grant had been estimated at.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying that. And we probably talked about it before. I apologize, I couldn't remember, so I just wanted to make sure my understanding was correct. Because I think as we move forward with the next piece here and the planning for capital workers and processes will need to include prevailing wages. So,
Yeah, and I wonder too if, Messick Cohen figured that
that's
in their estimate.
exactly. So that's a question I have that I want to ask you
Yeah.
as well. But
Yeah,
were they carrying prevailing wage when they did their estimates? Were they figuring just regular construction costs? Because there certainly is a factor that goes on there for the prevailing wages.
yeah, it's gonna add a certain percentage to any project.
So I will ask them to confirm if they had estimated based on that or not. And if it has not, then we'll have to factor that into any conversations we have for
They should
any.
be full wicks, right?
So probably Wix law and prevailing wage both.
Yeah, they should be full wicks.
So,
What's Wix?
Wicks law in New York breaks out some of the contracts when you do major work on a building or put up a new building. A company isn't allowed to come in and bid the whole shooting match. You've got to break out separate for your electrical, your HVAC, your plumbing, as opposed to your GC.
and you end up with at least 4 primes on the typical project.
Yeah,
GC, mechanical, plumbing, electrical. But it could be broken out even further than that. And you'll find different opinions on whether that's beneficial or not. You could have asbestos abatement be part of the GC contract, or you could have that as a standalone contract.
we had to break that up for the elevator installation.
And your electrical is different than some of your communications and AV. That can be different. And then also that's why construction management is so important on a public project when you're dealing with works. It's simply because you have more players.
Yeah, you have to make sure that they're playing in the sandbox all together. The contractors are coordinating their efforts instead of having one person just going, well, I'm gonna do my work and other people can follow after me. They end up with a lot of finger pointing. Attention, so.
And going back to Christian's earlier question about prevailing wage on a public construction project where you're dealing with all these primes and men themselves, this is where you can run into trouble if somebody hasn't been paying. And that's one of the things your construction manager, your clerk of the works does for you, is to make sure everybody gives you the reports. Because you're the one who's liable because you're building your contract.
Yeah.
We would be basically subject to the same regulations that any school district would.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. And confirm, that was my suspicion, but I wasn't positive. So then, I think that we've sort of been talking about a lot about this building, of course, but we have been talking about small projects at Lansingburg as well. And I think part of our goal as a committee is to sort of help develop a overall strategy, long-term plan of what the physical infrastructure of the library facilities are for our entire district. And what's a long-term plan? Obviously, we have to keep things open and going, but what's our long-term plan? Is putting Band-Aids on it the way to go forward? Or is there another way forward? So we've been talking about a couple different strategies, A through F so far. There may be some more. Well, in fact, I didn't correct that. I apologize. It is A through G. And before we dive into these strategies, I'd like to put a goal together that we can agree on, where this committee will come out with a recommendation to the board on a strategy or one or two strategies for final board vote on how to proceed with our long-term goals for keeping the Troy Public Library as a vibrant library system. Physical structure. Now, I'm not talking about what happens inside the buildings, but that we have the physical buildings in place, physical structures in place, so that the library can provide services to the community. And so are folks open for a conversation about a timeline for making a recommendation to the board?
How detailed do you want the recommendation to be?
Well, we've got some strategies here. I think we would need to look at these strategies. We need to do a cost benefit analysis. And then through that process, I think we can go through and winnow out.
Yeah, the costing out part is probably going to take us in August.
Well, and I have some thoughts on that. I think this has given us several pieces of this that we can use as a start, but there will be more research required. If we're looking for new property, I don't know anything about property values. So we as a committee are going to have to call some resources that we know to get some estimates and budgetary estimates. We're not looking for, and this is broad brush cost estimating. We're not looking to get down to pennies. I think if we get into the tens of thousands of dollars range of accuracy.
I think that's optimistic. 100,000 or more, or a couple 100,000.
Or maybe tens of thousands per year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what my thoughts are. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Well, that may be helpful too, because let's say that our first choice is very expensive. If that turns out to not be realistic, then it may be helpful to thought, consider the cost of other alternatives and
Sure.
making a final decision.
And I think our cost assessments need to include staffing costs. Does this mean that we're adding more staff? And we don't have to talk about individuals. I'm just talking about, if we have 4 different facilities, now we need 4 different managers for each building, all working under the executive director. That sort of level of strategy.
Staffing and energy costs.
Fuel, yes, exactly. Transportation, if we're going to be driving vehicles around hither and yon, we need to assess that. We need to include a value for that. So right now we've identified 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 strategies. Maybe there'll be 1 or 2 more. Some of the pieces are, I think, one final thought before some of the pieces are common between these different strategies. So I don't think that it's necessarily 8 times 1 month. I think, once we do our first couple, I think there are just pieces of this, oh yes, there's a price, we can carry that same price forward. So I think we may be able to get more efficient as we go along, as we learn more. But I think we set ourselves a goal that would be good. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And one of the things that I looked at and thought about it more is some of the current ones, there are bits and pieces of it that may be used in transition. They're not a permanent solution, but to get us where we want to be while we do work on one or more structures, we may have to do some of that just to keep a flag flying, keep working, while we can't use a building or buildings. We may have to use some of that.
That's good. Actually, I'm adding for list as.
Yeah,
back
I
on.
think even some of the restoration work and some of the, HVAC work is gonna be pretty disruptive.
Right.
Um,
I'll throw the big card. I think that if we do what we need to make this building safe and fit for purpose, just on the mechanical side, we're not gonna be working in this building for a year or more.
Certainly, I think we would have some downtime, and so how do we address that downtime? Is there some temporary facility we provide? Is there a cost associated with that temporary facility? So, I mean, there's a cost analysis, and then there's the pain and heartache analysis, and then there's the benefit analysis. I think those pieces may come together to help make this needed recommendation. So I'm going to throw out an idea and love to hear your feedback. I would love to make a recommendation to the board in 6 months. Thoughts?
Six months may be desirable to give us time to swallow it a bit, to start informing the next year's budgetary discussions. That's desirable. We can work towards it. I'm not giving you a kidney if we don't make it. But there is an advantage of saying, or maybe 6 months from the first of the year, but saying that by June, end of June, we've got something out there, some pretty good reasons why we don't. Because it would be helpful to give the board time to discuss with the director, all the interested parties, where we want going forward financially.
And this recommendation, so you're basically saying it would be, okay, we're gonna renovate this building, we're gonna bring it up to snuff, we're gonna add make it more 21st century. But we're not gonna have the details, like that's not part of it, it's just that this is the route we wanna take.
And it's not just limited to this building.
Right, but I'm just, like, for example, it's a broad kind
Yes,
of recommendation,
yes.
it's not like. Okay.
Yeah, and, we may need to come to the board with a couple options. I certainly think that makes sense, and then they may say, we need to get public input.
Mhm.
I think if we could come with something to the board in 6 months, that would may then be able to allow us time to get public input to develop a strategy that we could start to implement. And this is a long-term strategy we have to build because it's not going to happen overnight. We need public input, we need to gather resources and expertise that we haven't identified yet. So
I think one thing that would be helpful is more input from the community. We have the historic structures report, but it's like hundreds of pages.
yes, yeah, it's hard to digest.
I wonder if there's a way to, summarize that so that people, would reasonably read it. Obviously, nobody's gonna sit there and read the whole thing from, the public. And really get a conversation as broadly as we can, with the community.
The sense I got, and maybe I'm getting it wrong, is that I don't think the board is ready to open this up to the public and say, this is what we're thinking of doing yet. I think I'm hearing that some portions of the board want to do a reduced portion of this year and say, well, this is what we'd like to do. Others would like to say, you want to do the whole thing. And I think before we go, that's my sense. Do people concur with that?
Well, but I think, more of a, not, this is where we plan on going, but this is where we are.
This is where we are, yes.
Yeah.
I think
So that people can
right.
read, this is where we are.
I think that's
It's-
a very good point. This is where we are.
Yeah, we've been given a historic structures report by people who are objective here,
Yes,
telling us where we are.
yeah.
So, bringing people in from the community and say, what do you think about where we are?
Right, well, or this is where we are, where do you think we should go?
Right.
Mhm.
I mean, getting away from this idea, and this is what happened before, getting away from this idea, is this is what we're gonna do? If that's possible.
So, I
know the danger.
And maybe just rephrasing of this, or in a way that makes sense for me. Rephrasing it in a way that makes sense for me is saying, this is what we have as information. We know more on the condition of the building.
Yep.
We have some options, but we need, before we have that conversation, to really look at those other options before you go out to the public. Because once you get this idea in their head, it's going to be harder to, I think, say, and here's some other options. We're not at that point yet.
Right, but I think that's what we're saying, we're just gonna give them, the public, this is where we are. And you're gonna say to me, well, and then we're gonna say, well, where would you, based on that, when you think, what do you suggest we should go?
But that's just it. If you say, where do you think you should go? We need to come up with, say, these were the options, the other options we've come up with. So we're looking at another location, we're looking at a grant, however it is. We need to have that, I think, more clearly defined, more fully defined, before we go to say, so what do you think? And when you say, this is where we are, that phrasing says, this isn't just about the information, but this is where we're thinking. And it's not quite what all of us are thinking about all the pieces, the report's divided into pieces. It's conditions and it's future option.
Program.
It's those two pieces. And you say program, I'm looking at its future options of, again, physical layout, the building.
So I have an idea that we could use this as a tool of public engagement and to help bring some participation to this group. We could say, this is where we are, and we as a group are meeting regularly to talk about how we might move forward. If you have an opinion on this and you want to participate, you're welcome to join us and participate in this in a regular process. And that way people can't say, hey, you didn't, and then we can have public works sessions as well, when we're ready to roll out and have a conversation about, this is what we are thinking about recommending.
I still think we need to have those more information on other options before we do that, because what we may end up is that same, and we had a meeting here and had rows of people in the back who were just incensed about what they thought was a future option. We need to be clear about this is it. And why, and the costs.
So maybe, well, there are costs here. I think that's pretty clear.
Costs, not what's costs.
Like I said, we have costs.
Those costs, not the other costs. You were talking about looking at all the options and questing them all out. We need to know.
But I think that's, these are not costs that we're recommending. This is costs that have been identified by an impartial third party. And if we just focus, what if we were to release just a portion of the report that talks about the physical infrastructure assessment and the physical, the direct costs to address those physical infrastructure pieces without getting into the what I'll call programmatic side of things, and just release that portion to the public and invite the public to come join us and have that conversation.
We may need another month or two as this group before we bring it to the whole board. And then if the whole board is in, then it's gonna take us 6 months. And while we have that report from they wrote what they were told to as far as a historic structures report. And for this building, and we currently have 2 buildings. And it's not just historic preservation, but it's, and as Paul pointed out, they're concerned, some of it, what does it look like? But we've got those mechanical issues that are not gonna go away and are gonna have to be addressed sooner rather than later.
And that's in this report.
And the next part of that is, we may very well have to say that here is our 10-year plan. This is step one, this is step two. And then we may need to take a pause for a new capital campaign to get to step three, to what we truly envision as everything in the 21st century library. But we may have to do some underpinnings first. Because we're gonna run out of money before we run out of aspirations. I've seen buildings go from 30,000 square foot of aspirations to 20,000 square foot of this is what we can afford, really.
Well, why do we have to say this is where we are? Why don't we just say this is what the HSR said? I mean, people participated and, said, hey, we want to hear the results of this. And this is, why not provide that to them?
Well,
It's not saying that's what we're going to do, or this is where we are. It's just, was the result of what you participated in, or how it helped you.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I just think we need, additional input from the community. It's an unusual situation. You have this building. This building is important to a lot of people in this community.
In many different ways, yes.
I think in other cases, libraries have, had no trouble building a nice new building. Say, well, that's the old, main library. Who cares? Not our case.
People do care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've even had, I have colleagues come in and say, this is what a library should look like. I mean,
Okay,
it's
you work here.
everybody.
That's what he said to them.
Yeah, no, I
So
believe-
what you're up against is a little unusual, because when you look at this, when you look at the historic structures report and some of their estimates, I think, and I'm not an architect, but I could ask one, that, this is roughly 23,000 usable square feet. You could build that for about 12 million, about the same price that you would need to put into this one. You have to know stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the choice here. I mean, what are other people, willing or thinking about doing and willing to support?
I'm thinking that we may not be able to do all the historic preservation that they wrote in there, restoring it to its grandeur. I'm not really concerned that we get all the way back to their vision in 1897. Some of it, maybe, but some of it for me is that whole vision goes away and the ability to do any programming goes away. If we don't keep the place from flooding, burning, freezing, and we got to keep the lights on. And some of those mechanicals are going to have to be addressed.
It's what I try to do
Possibly
every day.
before some of the purest points on the preservation. And that also gives us the base to then do further changes in the future. But we're gonna have to, we got some things that can hurt people and some things that we're stuck with simply because we are on the National Register. And then we got some things, a lot of mechanical systems that are losing their end of life. The way I think about it is, it's time to send this old girl in for a couple of hips and knees. It'll be much better.
So is your concern that if we release this whole thing, that people don't really need to see the plan for what we possibly could do, what this building could look like?
Well, two things. One, I'm responding to everyone's concerns that the public could misconstrue this as, this is what we want to do. And you didn't ask us to come at us with pitchforks, which has happened before.
Right.
It wasn't exactly this strategy, but it was a different strategy, and people were very unhappy about how that was communicated. So we do need to be careful how we communicate that. So I agree, we don't want to just throw this on the table and say, okay, this is it. I think we do need to be nuanced in that. We welcome feedback on how we do that. And I think that would be something that maybe we turn over to the communications committee, which I think is really would be a tool to communicate that in some regards. And I'm open to feedback. I don't have a strong recommendation on that. I do think getting community input is critical, and I think we need to do that. When to do that and how to do that. I think there's some benefits to doing smart and strategic communication early to get participation here where we can have conversations and we can build some stakeholders into that group who aren't just the people in the room right now. I think the more we can get the public in to hear some of the detailed strategy and conversation, the better chance we'll have of getting thoughtful responses later as well. If we come in with a finished product, here it is, right, we're going to get people picking it apart. So I think we can get more people who are involved, not just in one meeting, but come to a sort of regular participation and hear some of that thoughts. We'll have a better strategy. Now, this equipment here hopefully will help with that process. Maybe people are listening and watching, maybe they'll come and look at or go back and look, 6 months ago, a year from now, 6 months ago, to see the conversations we've had to get to when we come ready to make a recommendation. But I think if we can get more people involved, that would be good. My feeling.
Two things. We can't just drop the whole thing out there and expect a good reaction. I worked for an intelligence officer who said a commander expected more than just an information drop. They wanted you to tell them the so what. And I don't think we have any kind of a story yet to tell the public about the so what. That's going to take 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, because we are dealing with the holidays. The other thing, in terms of public involvement, there are certain sectors of the community that we may need to invite in specifically, because this is going to cost money. It's time to let people who either have access to tax dollars or private grants, invite them in early, because some of what we're talking about here is more technical building stuff. We should probably be inviting in some of the landlords and major property owners who've got some familiarity with what we're talking about.
And I think
Some people who have an experienced, educated opinion.
some of the options we're considering include rental or leasing options or collaboration. So I think getting people who could advise us in that regard would be very valuable. So going back to the previous question, timeline, can we set ourselves a goal of the end of June? We have a recommendation.
Could I weigh in another factor? CFAs are due around, when is it, July 4th, or
So to see if
consolidated funding application awards?
okay, are due when?
I think sometime in July. I don't remember whether it's the beginning or the
Okay.
end. But one of the things that came up just this year was, oh, you should be going after these grants. Well, we didn't have the information soon enough, so we should consider those kinds of deadlines. Also, I think we need to not only look at this long term, but we have identified critical issues that we need to be addressing or thinking about at the same time,
So,
like the stained glass, and
so I would suggest that this document here gives us the information we need to go after CFA grants. Great example of that was HVAC systems and partial HVAC strategies. I think this document still stands here as a resource for us.
But we need to sort of be doing, working in
In
parallel.
parallel, yeah,
On those
and I
things.
think,
Also, there is money that's becoming available, the American Rescue Plan and so forth. A lot of demand out there. But if we don't ask, we won't get. So
and obviously that has.
I don't know what the chances are that we'll get any, but we need to throw our hat in the ring at least.
I agree with you, and again, I think this year could be a resource for that. That even if we were to have this building and decide we are gonna take option,
Wasn't there something about just small, let's see, restore main library to the extent needed as the local fringe? $2 million.
there had been an option where we said I was gonna do 4 new buildings and sell the main building, but I think that one went away, did not make the list. So yes, I think any of these options here would include work on this building to at least stabilize it. So I think that any of this work that we can chip away at with grants on an annual basis, or if other opportunities come up through COVID and ventilation, I think there are some things we can use for guidance on this here
Timeliness also based
that
on.
wouldn't necessarily
Ventilation concerns.
change our strategies here.
Right, but we need to pursue both things at the same time.
Agreed. Yeah. So does that change our need to make a recommendation to the board by the end of June? I don't think so.
Actually, I was wondering whether it needs to be a little earlier than that, just if, in case it might have an impact on what we would apply for. So if we did 6 months,
I don't think
that
so,
would be end
because,
of May.
because all these strategies here include either renovation of this building to a small amount or renovation of this building to a larger amount. So I think that if we have to get a grant together in a month from now, or 6 months from now, or in July, we can go to this book here and say, here's the thing we need to do. HVAC, that's a big one, or the layouts in this room, or the layouts in all the rooms. I think there's all pieces we can chip away at that don't necessarily affect whether we have a strategy to, in addition to renovating this building, to do other things as well.
I might have to chime in here a little bit. We've been chipping away for 30 years now at this thing.
Yes.
A lot of what you do, becomes out of date in like 10 years. I mean, roofs and all kinds of other things. So you're looking at chipping away. Well, I've been chipping away for 30 years, but there's a bunch of stuff that has to be redone.
Yeah.
Already.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had to redo the ramp. I mean, we don't have. I mean, it's difficult to get access to something that makes a lot of contribution, like, $1 million. Some big dollars. Even CFA is not that high.
500, okay.
And that, I will tell you, is enormously time consuming.
Yes,
And you may need grant writers to do this.
Yeah.
Because we still operate, a public facility, and that's what I do.
Well, and if we go ahead with a large construction project, we probably need a staff person to help administer that, because you're running a library already, to run a construction
Well,
site also. It's
Yeah,
gonna be-
eventually you kind of run out of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, you're only so many hours in a day, and you already have a full-time job, so.
Yeah, right.
We expect you to take that on in addition.
The CFA is enormously time consuming, not only getting the grant, but administering the grant and going, Trying to,
I agree with you.
I'm trying to finalize the historic structures report. Takes a lot of time.
The financial end of it.
Personally, I think we're stuck, that anything we want to do here, it rapidly puts us to a point where we are going to have to do ADA renovations, and we're going to have to do compliance on newer fire and building codes. There's a certain, unless the fairy godmother transports us tonight, there's a certain cost to stay in this building that is unavoidable. And we don't have, I think we're stuck with the building, because people value the building, and I'm not sure we got the scratch to go but do new. And I don't think we have the community support to go do new.
So can I go around the table and ask for a vote on whether people would be open to, as a goal, make a recommendation to the board by the end of June? I see a show of hands on who thinks that's a reasonable goal.
What is it?
To make a recommendation to the board from this committee by the end of June.
Should be. I think so.
I think I see 4 yeses. And
If I can vote.
Do you get to vote?
This is a committee, so I'm thinking people who are on the committee, if you're on the committee, to vote. That's why I'm interpreting it. Do I hear that you'd like to see a longer deadline, a shorter deadline? What are your thoughts?
I'm reluctant to set a date. I know you want to get it done. I know we need to get it done
It's a
sooner than
goal.
later.
It's a goal. It's not a,
But I'm reluctant as we're going to take a vote or make this a little bit more official to say that, because I know it could be detrimental in the long run. So I am really reluctant to say, we'll have this, or should have this by June.
I call that a part of leadership, what I would call it, but this is.
Well, that's your.
That's my opinion, that's my opinion, I openly admit that, so, not always easy, but, and that's part of my style, so there are different styles out there, I acknowledge that and respect that. So, you would rather not set a goal at all, Marie, what would be your preference?
Well, as I said, I prefer to see the goal a month earlier.
Earlier,
I
okay,
believe in targets. I consider goal, that targets are something that it's important to work toward,
Mhm.
or you never get anywhere. So I would like to see us work toward a recommendation.
okay.
I'm going to say another thing, by the way, about the CFA. The one thing that we have learned, that in order to have a request for the CFA approved, is you have to show you have the money in the bank to make your match. Which, again, that's another, such a big issue, if we're thinking about it for this year or by June.
I think that again might inform what size of grant application we might pursue.
So it's,
I think that also informs.
And I think that's a separate, I think that's a separate issue.
see, everyone keeps saying, how, because everyone keeps saying, if you're gonna do certain things, you have to have all the pieces and parts. It can't just be this like one little piece and then another little piece. They all sort of connect, which means it's going to be a fairly large project that you start with, even if it's just the,
We don't know.
well, that's just why I'm also having a real hard time with this for the public. And let's say we have this by June, which means we don't know, and we need to find out these things in order to make that decision. In order to move forward, I think we need more information.
Depends how you go to the public. I think if you're
Public
going
part
to-
even are saying by June, we're gonna do this. Or we're gonna come up with these recommendations. We don't know how long it's gonna take to get an idea of all those other pieces and parts.
I
And
think
supposedly some of that's in there, and then you can
Some
add
of
it
it,
up.
some of it is in there, yes.
But I do feel like at least if we have a goal and then we kind of like start really looking at this, as we get closer to June, maybe we're gonna realize it's not a realistic goal. But I think we gotta, we've been trying to do this for 30 years.
Yeah.
It's like, it's kind of,
If you wanna make it informal, I'll say, okay, let's try by June. But once you start saying it's a vote or it's a
No,
motion.
I said a goal. No one's gonna get,
Well,
no one's gonna get pilloried or.
There's no penalties?
It's the goal of the committee,
Yeah.
and the committee is responsible to the whole board.
We're responsible to each other too. I really think we are. You know, we are a team. And, you know, I want to see everybody contributing to the team and working towards a common goal. And our goals can change. But if we don't have goals, then what are we doing here? You know,
Again, if it's an informal, fine, let's try this for June,
goal, yeah.
as long as it's, like I said, it's not, we
Well,
don't formalize it.
what do you mean by informal versus not informal? I mean, this.
Motion, taking the vote, going through that whole
No,
process.
I
It's just a
would like-
sense of what
like to
people
see
are
us make
thinking.
the
It wasn't a
motion.
motion. It's not a formal motion. It's just a sense of,
Fine, I'm going along with sense.
Okay, okay.
But why not make a motion? Why not make a commitment that this is what you're going to do?
Well, because we don't know all the facts. You know, we may go get into this and find out, you know what, we can't get an assessment of what property values are here in Troy to purchase.
Well, then you can always make another motion that to
Okay,
extend the time.
And so, and we will do that if necessary. So I think I hear that we'd like to get everything done. We'd like to make a recommendation to the board on one or two options by the end of June, if not sooner.
Okay.
I will say that if you don't set these kind of deadlines, no decision ever gets made.
Well, that's kind of why we did the HSR, is we were trying to
Yes.
get a decision so we could move forward rather than always being in limbo.
I thank you for
It's time to
your.
go find out if we can afford a Kia or an F-150.
Or is it 3 Kias or 1 F-150? You know, I think that's for, so I thank you all for your discussion on this, or your thoughts on this. So I think here we'll try to get something.
Well, why don't we do the motion, do a vote, make a commitment?
I think we had a straw poll. I think I saw a majority were supportive of it, definitely. I think I've heard that there are 2 who are open to supporting that goal informally. And that's good enough for me as a commitment to each other. And I'm gonna bring that up, that we all talked about this here. You know, I'm not gonna say, I'm not gonna pound the table, I'm not gonna do anything like that, but I'm gonna say, we talked about trying to get a recommendation to the full board by the end of June. I think that if there are things that come up, funding opportunities that come up before then, this committee can talk about what those opportunities might be, what we might want to make as a recommendation. I think we can use this as a tool for that. But I don't think that in the larger picture, it's going to change our overall strategy here about what our priorities might be as we move forward. As Paul said, these grants are going to be small potatoes compared to this year.
$10 million.
Yeah, and I don't want to sneeze at you know, the grants that we've been getting and the work that we're doing. But I think we're trying to do something potentially bigger in the long run to get to a more sustainable, long-term, reasonable working environment and reasonable service environment for our constituents. If we can pull it off, and that's a goal of mine. So.
And I think we can more, by doing it, we can more clearly define certain other steps we may have to take to meet larger goals with this building. Be in terms of workspaces while we're out of here, how we stay connected to the community, what's done with our other structure. And that, hey, that might be the CFA grant for this year to do. We may need a lily pad to land while we do everything else.
So it's now 5:09. And we've been at this for an hour. I appreciate everyone's time, but I don't want to take up lots and lots of time going through all these different options here. I do want to spell a couple things in terms of the costs that are in here and the costs that aren't in here. And then an approach, I've been thinking about how to evaluate these strategies that we have. However, before we do that, I think Keith mentioned that there might be another strategy we'd like to add to this here, and I see Marie's got a question.
Well, no, I was going to say that we had delayed asking the newer members for their ideas that they might have. And so I would hope that we would have that occur here at this meeting.
Yes, I
And get
support
these
that
included.
entirely. So, please, I invite both.
Yeah, I don't see anything, I don't really have anything outside of, we have a lot of options here. That maybe we'll tailor or combine at some point, but I don't, there was nothing,
I
I
discovered.
didn't have any real innovative thoughts on it, unfortunately.
Well, value your input on it, and if you think we're heading the right way, that's a good thing. Keith, you think there's an option or strategy we haven't identified yet that would be valuable to add to this?
I think that we may very well find ourselves doing what I christened the lift and loo option in the burn.
Lift in lieu?
Lift and loo, the elevator in the bathroom, opening up that second floor. Because I think when we get into this, we're going to be out of this building for a year or more. And we're gonna need the burn as a place to work from. In addition to that, all staff may need a non-public workroom, leased, rented, loaned, to do some of what we need to do.
Be on a temporary basis or a permanent facility.
Yes, because the stuff I look at that I think needs to be done, we're gonna be all through their workspaces in the basement. They're not gonna be in there for an extended period of time.
And I'm sorry, I misunderstood, I didn't quite understand. You see that new administrative space as a temporary facility or as a permanent facility, or both?
At the minimum, to do some of what's been proposed with this building to keep it fit for purpose. And to then, the basics of what we need to do to then move on for the 21st century. We're going to be disrupting workspaces to the point where we are going to need, if we can't do it in the burn, we're going to need to provide a temporary workspace for certain back of house
So temporary,
operations.
okay.
And if we're out of this space for a year or more, depending on the amount of work we're doing, we are going to need to find a way, in addition to Lansingburg, to keep some kind of service point, some kind of pop-up service point in this end of the city. Downtown, south, keep it accessible. It won't be a full branch, small branch quite possibly, but it will be a service point, because I think it's always easier to keep your customer than to get your customer back.
And so I think I also hear that that's a temporary facility during construction, is that correct?
I think that would be part and parcel of keeping us going.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so ultimately speaking though, do you see that you'd like to see a different structure for how many branches the library has, say in 10 years from now? The library should have, right now we've got 2 branches, a main branch and a branch. Do you see that in 10 years, we should have more branches, fewer branches, or branches at different locations than where we currently are in a broad geographic sense? I mean,
While some of us grew up with the multiple branches and really liked them for introducing everybody in the community, I really question if we can afford that in the out years. I don't think staffing costs are going to go down. And right now, we may have to focus on what we have before we can go further out. And I think when I looked at the Mexico report, there's a certain amount of things that have to get done for the historic structure. But again, I'm a big one for dealing with the bones, the mechanicals, because that gives you the base to then, if you need to, you go out and back. We're gonna be out and back anyway for a stair tower. Oh, by the way, I stood up in the parking lot and looked at it and realized just how much stuff has to move.
Yeah.
In mechanicals to do that stair tower, but that's part and parcel of staying here. But we're gonna have to, we may not be able to do all 3 levels of the historic before we get into, I think we're gonna have to do the interior systems of this building. So we don't flood, we don't freeze, we don't burn.
So if I may point you to, on this agenda here, if you look on the back page. Option F in Frank. I think I heard that what you're proposing is similar to option F, but maybe not to the full extent as outlined in option F1. You'd like to maybe do a reduced approach to F1. You'd like to do not quite the full renovation that's identified here. You'd like to do a
Some of the historic preservation is less important than doing the mechanicals. So the interior of the building work, and remember, while this is a gift to the community that we're stewards of, we are chartered as a public library, and we still have to keep working as a library. And some of the things, some of those basic building blocks have to get done, even if some of the more aspirational things get added on later. You've got to be able to heat it, cool it, run power to it. And it doesn't rule it out at all. We may find ourselves on a multi-step campaign. I got a feeling that pretty much everybody sitting here is going to be off the board in the next 10 years before some of this gets done.
But let me see if I can tease that out a little more. Option F includes the stair addition. And I think I've heard you say that you feel that stair addition would be important.
Yes.
Option F includes an addition for the children's library on the ground floor. And do I hear that, do you think that is important or not important?
We need, obviously, the children's library needs more space. To do anything with space, changes in space, at this point, we need to get it, address heating, ventilation, air conditioning, ADA access, the fire suppression, because it is not gonna look the other way. They're not gonna be flexible.
Yeah.
You're gonna need a stair tower, you're gonna need sprinklers.
Yeah.
Half the plaster work is gonna get done simply because they're gonna punch enough holes in the walls. We'll repeat the plaster after the new mechanical systems go in.
But one doesn't exclude those things.
So do you think that, do you want to explore an option that does not include a children's library, or you want to explore an option that does include it?
We have to include changes in the children's library.
Okay, and then,
What they look like right now, I don't know. We may find ourselves making a change now as an interim step, and then doing more 5 or 7 years down the road.
yeah, well, that's definitely, phasing strategy will definitely be part of this conversation. I don't think it's necessarily all bit off. Oh, that's a good idea. We could take option F right here and say we could do a phased strategy, or we can do option H would be the same, except we do everything at one go.
And part of my phasing is before we start doing certain things on the interior of this building, we're probably gonna have to do something with the bird to at least give us a footprint to work from.
Right, and that's what is outlined in option 2, as I.
But we're gonna have to do at least enough in the bird to make better use of that space and stay connected to the community, serving the community while we renovate the interior here to serve in the future.
we talk about phasing of that library piece for the main part library, maybe phased over 20 years.
I don't think we should be using that number, but I think we might be at a 5 and then a 5 and 5 point.
So over 10 years then.
Yeah, but certainly I think we can do certain things, we can do things to prep for an addition, to add even more space. We should figure that in any of our costs on our mechanicals now.
Yep.
So it's a simple add-up.
Yep.
And we know, and like I said, looking at it, just looking, okay, we put that stair tower in that northwest corner. Guess what? We're gonna move the electrical and gas inputs to this building.
Yep.
Because they're right there.
Okay, this has been very helpful. I appreciate it. The one thing I just want to add as a preview of how things might move forward. Two things. So as part of the this report, they say the scope of the work, items not included in the following costs are as follows: contingencies, architect engineering fees, owner financing fees, inflation, hazardous materials abatement, and furniture and fitments.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. That's a huge amount.
That's a lot, and they have not really captured all of it. So there are a couple pieces that I started putting together, a little back of the napkin sort of design contingencies. This is a design here based on initial inputs. I imagine as we get into it, people will start saying, oh, we actually need to have this here and that there. So it's a good idea to include design contingencies at this early phase, just in the budgeting standpoint. And as we go through the design process, should we choose to go through the design process, as we learn more, that design contingency gets smaller as we learn more. So right now we don't know much, so I recommend carrying a conservative design contingency. That could be in the range of 20%. Escalation. We're planning now for construction that's going to happen in 5 years and in 10 years. There's inflation that happens every year. We figure 3% inflation per year. We can figure out, oh, that's going to be 15% over 5 years. You know, some work we're going to do next year, that'd be less inflation. Some work will be a little bit longer. So inflation may change. I suspect that could happen. But at least right now we sort of carry a number just to sort of assume that there's going to be something that was planning for it. So I would recommend we carry a cost for 15% for escalation.
Even if the fairy godmother gave us some money tonight, the very first steps wouldn't happen for another year and a half by the time we got our design and approvals and bids.
For sure.
There are incidental expenses that we need to plan for. Incidental expenses would include things like insurance, financing costs, legal fees, temporary facilities. Do we need to build, do we need to rent space so that we can operate while construction's going on?
Or just, as well as store, because some of the
Storage, that's right.
some of this stuff is gonna have to be put in climate controlled storage.
Construction administration, or grant writing. You know, Paul has a full-time job. Your staff is all employed to the maximum of their time availability right now. They're busy. They're not sitting there twiddling their thumbs. We probably will need to assume we're going to need to hire somebody to help us with some of this work. We should carry a cost with it for that as part of our cost estimating process at this time. And then there's some costs associated with bidding. Bidding, especially with Rick's Law, multiple prime contractors. You need to, it's not just like here, come pick them up. There's a whole process of there's some costs associated with that. Oh, and by the way, we're going to have to hire architects or engineers if we want to do any physical changes to any buildings that we have. So those are all incidental expenses. And again, using very round numbers, I would assume 20% to capture all those round, and as we learn more, that number may shrink or grow. But That's what we use on projects on our side. And then, in addition, then, in case that wasn't enough, I would recommend carrying another 15% for construction contingencies.
How does that differ from the 20% for contingencies that you started out with?
That was a design contingency. That's what's, we're getting to design, and Paul and the staff get in here and say, you know what, this little casework we showed here that shows up on this plan here, this little curve thing, well, that's really too small. We need to have something that's twice as big, and we need something over here also, we need something over here. We may get some new board members and say, you know what, we really need to do this. And we say, yeah, you know, that was a good idea. We probably should have thought that, we didn't. So right now, that's just carrying for extra design pieces that we want to build in the future.
So how much did you say the construction contingency?
Construction contingency, I would figure at least 15%. And that's,
Anything
Do you
else?
have, did you include a project manager for, as an
I
expense?
did mention that as a construction administrator, project manager, yes, I think there would need to be something.
'Cause this is fairly large scale, complicated.
Absolutely, and that could include grant writing as well, so. These are my back of the napkin things. I think as we learn more, that 20% is really that's a very rough number. And
20% for design contingency?
well, there's 20% design
Right, I
contingency,
just didn't.
15% escalation,
And 20%.
20%
I just
for
didn't know which. 20%.
incidental expenses, which was including this.
Okay, so
construction
you were talking
administration.
about the 20% for incidentals.
Yeah, and maybe it's actually 25%.
A request,
Yes, ma'am.
when you do the notes, do you think you could write this all out? with-
Of course.
Even if it's a range, you don't have to say 20% to 20-ish.
I
however you wanna
think
phrase
it's
it.
going to say approximately.
Just a way for me, I mean, I've taken some notes, but it'll help if I can re-see it to typed out that this is what a design contingency is, this is what the inflation, this is what.
Sure.
I appreciate that.
There's enough here on the fingers of the other hand to raise.
So is that it, or do you have more expenses?
Well, I was going to elaborate a little bit more on construction contingencies. That would include unforeseen asbestos that's found in the basement. Now, we're going to do investigations as part of this process.
There's always unforeseen expense.
Even on a new build.
Sorry?
I'm just waiting for the bottom line here.
I'm saying, I think we're getting close to the bottom line for
Well, I
the
think-
costs that are identified in here. So any of these costs in here, see here, don't include that stuff. I think any of these costs in here, you need to add that on to these costs. So I don't think it's a $2 million project in this book.
Well, if I had earlier used the figure 10 million, we're now up to 17 million.
Something like that, yeah.
That's if you do everything. We're gonna have to, as a board, determine what we can afford and what we're required to do and what else we value. We probably aren't gonna be able to do everything that was mentioned.
No. Well, unless we choose to do something completely different.
Well, the other thing I think, and I'm not speaking professionally, but I think their estimates are low.
Well, that's why I asked the question about prevailing wage.
I mean,
I'm
not
gonna
even
follow up with-
counting that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, their raw estimates, I think are low.
I think they're optimistic, I agree. Yeah, there are a couple of things on here, like, you can't get anybody out here for $10,000.
No.
So, I'm gonna say prevailing wage, which may affect us here, and then, these contingencies, I think will add up, and, I think, you know, they took a shot at this here, but they did not get detailed cost estimates, they're not professional cost estimators, they did not get bids from contractors to confirm these numbers, so as we move forward in our planning process, I think we need to be conservative. I don't want to say, oh yeah, sure, we can do this all, let's go do it. Because I'd be doing us a disservice, so.
And some of our estimates need to be high simply because we are in this unique structure.
The other piece that I want to talk about is we have these options A through G, or it will be now H, I guess we're going to add that option, phased option. To do that analysis of how do we compare these things, I'm going to try and put together a matrix, list all the options, What happens at the main branch? What happens at Lansingburg? Is there a new facility, new property here? Old option. It is. Each of those would have an initial cost, and it would be spread out then to be a cost per year average, over 10 years. If we're looking at a new site, are we buying, are we leasing, are we renting? What's the annual cost for that? If we're doing financing, what would the finance percent, what's the rate for finance for the borrowing money? I don't know, we'll have to find that out. And then annualize that out. If they're staffed, what's going to be the staffing increases per year? And we get really sophisticated with this. Oh, at the beginning of the project, there'll be no staffing changes, but as we get new places open, all of a sudden our staffing changes go up, our construction costs go down. So it's possible to do this here as I'm going to start with a very simple spreadsheet, but it could be possible to take that out over per year.
I'm gonna ask, just interject a question. Can we borrow?
No,
I didn't think so.
But we can bond.
Right.
yes,
So when I say.
that's the only thing we can do.
Yes, we can
I
bond.
heard the word borrow, right?
I apologize.
I'm
I'm not a
emailing
finance
it.
person, but and I'm not very good at that, so I may use the wrong terms. I apologize. Please correct me.
No, I'm not trying to correct. I just
Bonding
wanted to double
costs,
check.
but there carries a cost for bonding.
Oh, sure. There's lots
So
of-
I
oh,
can say
very true.
finance / bonding.
And that cost is higher than you might think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not cheap.
Depending, I don't know what the city would charge if it went that way, but they asked me,
Fortunately, there are many
it's
ways.
in the 100,000.
Unfortunately, there are many options on ways to approach that. Although we may need to get a bonding council to advise on what those options would be. And again, that would be some infernal costs that we'd have to carry and plan for if that's something we want to do. So that's, let's see, fuel. Fuel would also be on that. If there are changes, if we have another building, so we have to heat that building, we have to cool that building. We may have, or we're going to go with a mobile library that's on a vehicle that goes around, or vehicles that go, there are fuels with that as well. So I'm going to try and put together an initial spreadsheet that sort of captures some of that. Across the top, we have a list of all the options as we go up and down,
Be filled in.
and then we're going to start filling in.
Okay, it won't be filled in today.
Well, I don't know all the answers, and I'm hoping that we as a committee will be able to come up with answers on this, or at least approximations that we can use to start this estimating, and use this at least as a tool to help us to start eliminating or promoting or developing or enhancing options. So next month, I hope to come with that. Next month, I will come.
Let me ask you that question about next month while we're at it.
Yes, sir.
If we thought of maybe doing one of the, is there space we could do this in the bid? Just because that, we do have to consider that building, and it might be beneficial for us to be there.
So we actually, when I joined the board, we did a tour of the burn and we did a tour of this building so that we could get to see a chance to see the building in person. I think there's value to that, and
We,
I guess.
I
we may
remember
be
doing
familiar
much
with
more
it.
detail to it here. When I saw it in Lansingburg, we didn't get into some of the other spaces, and we may need to, we do need to consider that. We do need to see the place again.
I'd be interested in doing that tour also. Would it be okay if we reached out to you to do a tour of the buildings?
Yeah, we could meet up at Lansingburg next time.
But we wouldn't have the owl there.
And I
With
think-
that,
We wouldn't have the owl.
We can bring that, it's.
So,
well, nobody's,
Evelyn had said that it doesn't react well to being moved.
but I'd like to suggest that we do the tour outside of the regular meeting time.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to say.
I'm recommending we do the tour outside the regular meeting time.
Okay.
Are you open to? taking a
yeah,
tour?
anytime.
And would you be open to getting together at a time outside the regular?
Yeah, Thursday or Friday, end of the workday, or Saturday morning.
We can even do a tour of the basement. That's really.
That's where the action is.
Yeah,
That's
I've
where
been
the
down
action
there
is.
by myself, and it's.
you don't have to go again.
Okay.
That's where the
I'm
action
gonna go
is.
down there.
Does anybody else want to go on a tour of the burg?
I would go.
Okay.
I love parties. I love parties, sure.
Okay.
Make facetious.
Again, terminology, I think it's
Make
not a party.
facetious.
Okay, do you wish to?
I love gathering, how's that?
Just
Sure.
please don't do it, please don't do it on a Tuesday, is all I ask.
So I think that Thursday or Fridays are good for Keith, Saturday's good for Keith, and
Yeah.
I think you're working Monday through Friday, so.
I like to, yeah.
Well, let's see if we can make, aim for a Thursday or Friday, might that work for you,
Oh, yeah, it just depends on the particular day.
Evelyn?
Depending on which day.
Okay, I'm gonna suggest not the 24th of November.
We, you know,
That's the
evenings
way
are, evenings would work. It's gonna be dark most of the time anyway.
Okay, evenings are generally dark at London versus the 12. So,
We got lights up there.
okay,
We go out the lights if we need to.
Are you gonna look for a date?
do we want to, how about, if we can, would the 2nd or 3rd of December be a possibility?
I would prefer not not that Thursday, that first Thursday.
Not the 2nd, so Friday the 3rd?
Friday the 3rd is more doable,
Friday
or
the
any
3rd.
other, or the other Thursdays are more doable.
December 3rd. December 3? Do you have a time?
Oh. Yeah. I'm sorry, I have a note in here that says that Friday the 3rd, I have an opportunity to babysit my granddaughter. And so
Well, I
that
can
may
see why you might
take
wanna do
precedence,
that.
unless we can do earlier in the day.
So will we 9 or 10?
1 o'clock, would that be a possibility?
I have something at.
Which
2.
day
I have
now?
something at 2.
Friday the 3rd?
Can we do it earlier than one?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Can we do it earlier than that? I have something at 2. I have to be in Albany at 2.
At 2,
Yeah, so can we do
How's
that?
11?
We New York.
11?
How's 11?
Does 11 work?
I'm sorry, but you.
Can you do that?
Well, I don't, you know, I know, come on.
Actually, you can.
I haven't been up in the cupola in a long time,
noon.
or up in the
That's right.
attic.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that could be.
I haven't been up there in a long time.
Would 11, would 12 be a possibility?
Yeah,
Carolyn?
Yeah, that should work, right? I'll just leave if I have to. If it's taking longer than.
December 3, 12 p.m.
At P. L.
what time did we say?
12 o'clock?
Noon?
At
Okay.
noon.
Yeah, we could do it.
I was thinking the snowman's closed off.
Yeah.
That is unfortunate.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
I appreciate your help for that.
We could
and,
do that.
we Look forward to that as well.
Will we get to go up in the cupola?
What time?
Will we get to go up in the cupola?
Yeah,
Carolyn's-
it's up in the attic with,
I haven't been up
other-
there in a long time.
with other creepy stuff.
Well, the last time I was up there was all the pigeons, and that, so I'm not
know.
going any
No,
further.
they're really.
I think there's
So there could be more.
there's an old ladder that you can actually see up into the cupola.
Can you remember?
I've been up in the First United Presbyterian steeple.
Yeah. The big thing is, in Lansingburg is kind of dealing with the layout of the building, which was a school and not a library.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything you want to bring to the table for building related issues? Okay, well, hearing none, then I move that we close our meeting.
Just housekeeping detail?
Yes, well, next meeting, you're gonna ask.
Yes, I'm going to ask.
Thank
Because
you.
I did note you had said we are going to be doing this the third Wednesdays. And I'm sorry, I'm being me again. I thought we had come to, I thought that'd be the fourth Wednesday,
So,
except for this month and next month because they're holidays.
okay,
But then we were gonna revisit it again and hopefully go back to, say, Wednesdays, the fourth. I will just say now that third Wednesdays going forward, I can do it this month, I can do it next month, will be unsustainable. I like Marie's word, unsustainable, because I have a standing meeting in the Freestville on the third Wednesday that goes into later afternoon. And getting back here, this will be difficult.
okay, so, thank you for mentioning that, and I know sometimes I screw that up, so my apologies.
Oh, you didn't screw up. You were right that we said because of the holiday weekends, it was going to be, and it's so hard. Come on,
So we're gonna say the 15th for our next meeting,
Yes,
but the meeting after that, we would look at the 26th, if I understood that correctly, of January.
oh, I do have my very new calendar. Isn't it? Where's it? So excited. This will be the first thing. Does that sound agreeable to people? Good. January 26th.
So on the optimistic side, I may not be around for the April 27th, fourth Wednesday.
Oh,
Yeah,
what month did you shoot?
that is the tentative retirement day,
Mazel tov.
Which one?
April 27th.
April 27th, so, perfect excuse then to leave work early on the 26th, let's go to have a good time at the Troy Public Library Construction Committee meeting.
Yeah, no, no. Congratulations.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate all your help and your input. And I'll send out notes shortly. And I apologize that the agenda